Hello, everybody. I'm Audrey Leach, reporting here for the Edit Girls podcast today, and we have a very exciting guest. She is Joanna Naugle. I'm going to read your bio because it's too good. Joanna Naugle is a Brooklyn-based editor who won 2 Primetime Emmys, 2 ACE Eddies, and 2 BFE Cut Above Awards for her work on The Bear. She is a partner at Senior Post and has edited various TV shows there, including Rami, Big Mouth, Some Good News, 2 Dope Queens, and Human Resources, as well as several films, including Molly and Max in the Future, Kate Can't Swim, and Before You Know It. So welcome to the podcast today, Joanna.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be talking to you again.
Before we get into my questions, I feel like I need to address the fact that we do know each other already, and we have, I think, a cute story.
A great
I think it's cute. Which was that I was in film school at NYU in 2018, and they have these little job fairs on one of the floors at Tisch, and so I went, and you just so happened to be sitting there with your business card, and I was on the lookout for post stuff at that job fair. So I took your card, and then I put it on my bulletin board for 3 years or something. And then when I think when I graduated, maybe I emailed you. Weirdly, I ended up working for the sister company of Senior Post through my other friend. So it was just kind of meant to be in some way.
Oh, absolutely. I remember too, going to that job fair and nobody wanted to talk about posts. So I was so thrilled that you came over, and I was like, yes, another young woman who wants to be an editor. And when your name came up at Leroy, I was like, wait, I know this person. So anyway, it just felt like kind of the perfect worlds align when we ended up working together and overlapping at Leroy for such a long time, doing a bunch of commercial stuff and fun side projects too.
Oh yeah, all the side projects. So for the purposes of today, obviously there's a lot going on in the film and TV industry, or the lack thereof, honestly. I feel like I've even been getting asked some questions about how am I getting jobs, or how am I feeling about certain things going on in the industry. So I feel like people definitely would want to hear what you think. But before we get into all of that, I want to just take us back in time. The answer to these questions, I don't even know. So I'm curious. I would love to know kind of how you decided on post-production as a path. Was it your preference from the start, or did it kind of develop over time?
When I went to NYU in the film program, I kind of had no idea what I wanted to do. And as you know from the program, you kind of start out and everyone takes the same classes. And I was like, maybe I want to write, maybe I want to produce, maybe I want to edit, but I wasn't totally sure. But then I took this class sophomore year called Sight and Sound Film, which everyone has to take if you're a part of the film program. And my year was one of the last years where we actually shot on 16 millimeter film and got to actually cut it on a Steenbeck. I know, which was so cool.
Oh my God.
I know. I think the year after was the last year, because Michael was the very last class I got to do it, my husband. But that was so formative for me, because the first year at NYU, I didn't love being on set, and I felt a little bit am I in the right place? I'm not really sure kind of where I fit in and where my passions lie. And then as soon as I was actually cutting and taping film together on a scene back, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense for me. I feel like I'm a creative person, but I'm also very organized type A person. And I was like, oh, editing is just figuring out how to do the puzzle without having the exact map of how it's supposed to go together. So I just spent a disproportionate amount of time in the editing labs during that semester, and just really fell in love with it. And then from there I was like, okay, I think instead of directing or instead of writing or producing, I'm going to just pursue editing as my main focus, and went from there.
I'm so jealous. God,
I know.
What year was that?
2010, maybe 2009, 2010, I guess. Because I started college in 2008. So yeah, I guess it would have been my sophomore year. Mm-hmm.
That checks out. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a really good answer. I feel like maybe if there was a way for 18-year-olds to know how serious they were about post-production, it would be amazing if they had some kind of or maybe just for the seniors who are trying to pick post, to have them do that, because it's so valuable. I feel like.
Yeah, and it just made you have to be so much more intentional with your cuts, you know? It's like it's so
Yeah.
easy to just be like, "Control Z, I don't like that." But with this, it was like, okay, every time you cut, it's like, I want that to frame different. It's like, okay, now you gotta remove the tape, hope you don't damage the film, put in one more. You know, it really kind of made forced you to like slow down. And we didn't even have sync sound. Like most of these things were just little, black and white small things. And like looking back on the projects now, there was nothing like super profound about them, but it was a very formative kind of like experience to me. I'm very glad that now we have digital tools. I wouldn't want to do that
Yeah.
always. I have no idea how the assistant editors of the past like organize like miles and miles of film. But for doing these like little, projects to like whet my appetite, it was so fun.
And it's so this is a bit of a side note, but just interesting to think about the history of editing too. It was originally viewed as like a woman's job, as the men realized that it was like important.
Exactly. They were like, "Oh, wait, this can be
Basically, it got
creative? No, no,
taken.
no, we should do it." Yeah, yeah, it's so crazy. They were like, "This is
Yeah.
like sewing your delicate little girl fingers. You can do it. We'll let you have this like
Right.
menial task." And then they were like, "Wait, this is a huge part of putting a film together. Never mind, we want to do it now." So it's so fun. What a fun history.
It's so fun. Yeah. I also am curious what your first jobs were.
Yeah, so my first job out of school was actually working at SNL. I had interned there.
Ooh.
Yeah, I interned there for my last semester at NYU, and then I was so lucky they hired me for like a full season outside as soon as I graduated. But I was basically like the IT person there. So I think my role was like Mac administrator. So
Oh
my
my
job was
god.
basically
What that
I
seems high
know.
stakes.
I'm telling you, I mean, like half the time it was like, turn off the computer, turn it back on. Everyone was like, you're amazing. And half the time it was like, the server's down, 21-year-old Joanna, what do we do? And I'm like, I have a BFA. I know how to like, I can write a great essay about Citizen Kane. Does that make me qualified for this job? I don't
Right.
know. So it was honestly, it was so like being in that environment really is so fun. And there's so many people who spent longer there and have more insight into what SNL is like. So I was so glad I got to be there for like 2 full seasons, one as an intern, one as an employee. But I realized there wasn't a lot of editing that went into the live show. The people who cut the pre-tapes
Yeah.
aren't full-time employees. They're actually like freelancers who just come in for the weekend, basically live at 30 Rock for like 72 hours, make an amazing like, pre-tape and then go home. So I was like, I think I'm more on a path to like be a producer here rather than be an editor. So I was like, I think if I want to do that, I should, go elsewhere. And two of the people who were editors there who I looked up to were Adam Epstein, who cuts the bear with me now, and Kelly Lyon, who
Oh.
I've worked on with her on other things. She just won an Emmy for Everyone's in LA, the John Mulaney show. She's amazing. So it was so cool to look at these people and be like, oh, I want to be where they are. I think I need to like leave, even though it's so cool to like say I work at SNL and be there for the live shows and everything. It wasn't really putting me on the right path. So I decided to
Mhm.
leave and pursue freelance editing. And then a friend from NYU was like, you should meet my friend Josh Senior. He just opened a post house called Senior Post. And that's like one of the first places I started freelancing was for Josh doing like branded content and commercial videos. And we would kind of have our little laptops and just like cut next to each other. But it was like kind of like editing boot camp because it was just like any project that came through. It was like, okay, figure out what this client wants, like figure out how to cut this like music video. So it was so fun to be like, I get to be paid to edit. It gets to be, fun fast paced things. And also on the side, kept trying to cut like short films and find like micro budget features to cut. So I wasn't totally losing like that scripted side that I loved from being at NYU and making all those student films with, friends and collaborators, but also
Mhm.
paying rent and, getting to have job consistency and really have this great working relationship with Josh, who, I think we had very similar sensibilities. So it was very easy for us to kind of collaborate and put together things, for different brands and commercials.
Right, and he obviously had ambition too to, like, get back over into scripted.
Yeah, even at that time, I think we both really wanted to get back into the scripted world and just didn't totally know how. And so we knew that like the commercial stuff, like Josh already had built up a lot of clients. I was able to kind of come in and help him to do a lot of those videos. But on the side, it would be like, okay, if we made enough money to like pay, the rent of the space, let's bring in this like short film that pays no money, but we're really excited about the director. And that led to, by the time a bigger opportunity came up that was higher paid, we could point to this other work that we did for less money, but showed that we were like ready to take on the next challenge.
I feel like that actually is one of the keys of like navigating freelance editing when you're trying to do a different type of project or like a bigger project because people often ask like, well, it's like chicken or the egg. Like if I don't have it to
Hmm.
show, then how can I show that I can do it? Once you have like enough money to live and all that, like take some time, do something for less that is more artful and then use that.
Yeah, totally. And I think as you're first starting out, like the first thing you should do is kind of just say yes to any like paying opportunities and just be like, I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to get pigeonholed into something. And I'm like, starting out, like I was just saying yes to anyone who would pay me to edit or somewhat adjacent to editing. And then as you build up a few more credits, then you can be a little bit more choosy in terms of like, oh, I really just want to do scripted or I want to do doc or I want to specialize in this type of commercial. But yeah, for a long time, I was working with people I really liked, but it wasn't exactly the type of thing I wanted to be doing long term. But a lot of the, if I didn't have kind of those years of connections working like with Josh when the bigger opportunities came for scripted stuff, I didn't really have a lot of credits to speak to that. But I had enough people who were like, no, we trust her. We've been working with her for several
Yeah.
years. Let's give her this opportunity. Like that's everything. You just kind of need that one person to be like, not to go all Lady Gaga, but like you do need kind of that one person in the room to be like, yes, she can do it. Let's give her a shot. And then when that moment comes, meet it and exceed their expectations and just knock it out of the park and be ready for it.
Right. And also like people change what they're doing all the time in terms of like who they're hiring and what they're hiring them for. So if they know you from editing like some branded thing really well, it doesn't necessarily knock you out of like whatever they're doing later.
It, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tough when you just want to get people just want to hire you for the same exact thing over and over. And then you have to
Yeah.
break the mold sometimes. At a certain point, you have to like balance, like you said, the like, okay, I need to just get really good at one thing. But then when the opportunity comes to cut a feature that's going to pay me nothing, but I love the script, like be willing to take that risk too and hope that it leads to something else.
It's sort of related. Do you think that it is necessary to be an AE to be an editor
Oh
in
my
today's
gosh.
climate?
Such a controversial question because
I
I did
know.
not AE that much, but I do
I
think that
know, but
if
neither
I
did
was
I.
yeah, that's the thing. But if I was
Yeah.
starting out today, I'm like, maybe I would go the AE route. I feel like there's like two different ways that you can kind of like approach early in a career. And that's like just continuing to cut anything you can get your hands on and then hope that through hard work and a little bit of luck like me, the people who you surround yourself with will go on to bigger things. And then you get to cut, a show that you love that gets you a lot of attention and leads to things you love. Or you can go the AE route, which is a little bit more dependable and work with a bunch of different crews and build up a lot of connections and then make the jump when you're able to. And I think the second route is more like reliable. Like I think
Yeah.
things do need to like align a little bit. For things to work out with the first pass. And there are certain things that like I don't feel super confident with in the cutting room. Like I never had to do like kind of crazy turnovers or anything like that. Like I definitely rely on like my AEs for some of the more like technical VFX temping, things like that. And I kind of only know how to work like my way because I've always
Yeah.
kind of gotten to be the editor and call the shots. Whereas like, you know, there's probably ways that I could be a little bit more efficient. And I also love when my AEs are like, you could actually like do this differently. And sometimes I'm like, no, this works the same way. And then I think about it and I'm like, nope, I'm just being precious. What should we do? What's the new tool? But like, I only cut in Adobe Premiere. Like I never was forced to kind of have to do Avid in a professional environment. I did like one job when I graduated from NYU in Avid. And since then I've barely used it. So if I was an AE, I probably would, go back and forth between the programs a little bit more. So anyway, all that to say, I
Yeah.
don't think it's necessary to be an AE to be an editor. It is very different skill sets. But that being said, sometimes I'm like, it would have been cool to have a little bit more of like a mentor relationship in a cutting room for a while to just see
Yeah.
how an editor conducts themselves in the room. And that's one of the things I love about cutting TV is you get to work on a team with editors. And like, I've learned so much just from like working alongside Adam and now getting to have Meg, my AE on the pilot of The Bear, cut episodes of The Bear, like seeing how she's like grown to like work in like a cutting room. It's been so cool to have that. And part of me feels like I missed out on that a little bit by not being an
Mm-hmm.
AE, but I also feel like I jumped the line a little bit in some ways by getting kind of taken along with
Right.
these collaborators who I love working with. So I'm very grateful for that at the same time.
Yeah. I feel similarly, except I'm still in the spot now where it's like, well, I could go be an AE still. Like, I could do
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And I am, I'm always kind of looking out for that. But at the same time, like, Avid is terrifying.
I know. I think I ruined you by being at Leroy and being like, Premiere only. You never need Avid. And it's like, maybe we do need
Yeah.
Avid sometimes.
Yeah, well that's a good segue because in regards to the bear, like I watched all your interviews that you've done a fair amount of interviews about editing the bear, so I don't
Mhm.
want to like repeat questions because I heard a lot of similar like themes. Listener, you should go listen to those because they are very informative. But the bear is edited on Premiere, which brings so much hope to my soul. I just like can't believe that a show as successful as The Bear was edited on Premiere, although like Everything Everywhere All at Once was edited on Premiere.
Yeah, I know. I
So
feel a little bit like I'm like, there's dozens of us. There's dozens of us in Premiere. But yeah, I I think that Premiere has gone a long way in making teamwork so much more accessible, like through the program. Like I think when I talk to a lot of editors and they're like, I can't believe you cut in Premiere, like how I just couldn't give up like the team projects in Avid. And I'm
yeah.
like, actually, now you do have Adobe Productions, which works amazingly. And that's what we've used on every season of The Bear. We use it on Rami as well, where you can have multiple people in different projects at the same time. It's super similar to Avid, where you can see that it's like, oh, Adam has this project. It's locked. I can't hop in there. And, Noah's in this project. So I'm going to tell him to jump out and he can pass something to me. So anyway, it makes collaboration so much easier. And with Lucid, everyone can be working remotely, which is so nice. Once, the Bear team comes back from Chicago, everybody's in person at Senior Post. But when they're in Chicago, we're like, well, we may as well work from home most of the time. It makes it a little bit easier. I like to go into just like, hibernation mode when I'm doing my editor's cut sometime and be like, I just want to drown out the world and focus up on this. So it's nice to do that from home. But yeah, there's several other shows, like you said, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Kirk Baxter, who's David Fincher's editor, they use Premiere, which was really awesome. I know the team from Atlanta cut on Premiere. So there's like a couple of teams, but I think starting out, you should
It's the cool
absolutely.
people.
It's the cool. Your words, not mine. No, I think I think starting out though, you should know both. If you're
Yeah.
trying to like get your foot in the door and get a job. And leaving NYU, I definitely knew both, but when I just kept, like I said, getting to make the workflow, I was like, oh, it's going to be Premiere. Actually, at the time, it was Final Cut 7 for me. And then I like switched to
Right.
Premiere and was like, oh my God, so different. It was not different at all. It was so easy to switch. But at the time, it felt like such a big change. But yeah, it's worked well for us. I'm like #1 Adobe fan. I'm always like, come to our
Yeah.
side.
Also, a question about the bear. I was rewatching some episodes last night and I was thinking about wondering about how you kind of choose your preferred shots. Like, do you prioritize performance over any kind of technical reason to choose one shot over another shot? Because it's so chaotic a lot of the time. And maybe there's going to be a lot of like ADR, or there's going to be a lot of something like fixes that can be made later on. Like, do you mostly choose for performance over technical issues?
Even my favorite teacher at NYU was Sam Pollard. Did you ever have him?
Oh,
As
yeah. Yeah.
love Sam Pollard. And he would always say, like, everyone thinks continuity is the most important thing in editing. It's not, it's performance. You can get away with like egregious continuity errors if people
Yeah.
are locked into the performance. So I think that's definitely what I'm drawn to first and foremost. And it's almost like fun as you're watching kind of dailies to be like a little bit, make a game out of it and be like, what's the difference between this take? Like, what are the things that I'm noticing? Because like, as you're watching dailies, if you're really not tuned in, you can kind of like, they all blur together. But if you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
really love how like, Io's lip like quivered a little bit in this take, like it really shows her vulnerability. Or like, Jeremy had such a like funny little smirk at the end of this, like that really is such a great button to the scene. Like trying to look for those little moments, like that's what I'll kind of like try to latch onto as I'm like reviewing the footage for the first time. But then at the end of the day, it's also just about like finding that rhythm, like sometimes like the energy can be so different between takes that you're like, okay, if this is the one I want to go with. I have to kind of like use this as my skeleton and build on top of it. But yeah, it is so true. Like the fixes you can make with ADR, a little bit of like VFX, luckily our camera team led by Drew on the Bear is so awesome that a lot of times it's not like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we can't use this take because there's a technical error. But if there ever is, like a boom in frame or something, I'll always be like, we can mask it out. We'll be able to get around that. So try to avoid that for the most part. And luckily we don't have like too much. It's all like kind of invisible VFX we're normally doing on the show. Like it's very rare that we have like a big VFX shot. But if it's just like, oh, we need to change this slightly, we usually can nudge it enough that we can use the preferred performance take, because that's the thing that people remember the most is like the
Oh,
connection to
yeah.
the characters. Yeah.
Okay, my final nerdy-esque question about the bear is there like a B-roll production unit? Like is there like people who are specifically shooting B-roll, because there's so much and it's so good. I'm like, this is not like it's not done in like any sort of slapdash manner. Like this is like really good B-roll.
From my understanding, there's not a dedicated unit, but they do shoot most of the show with two angles. So there are two like
Oh.
amazing camera operators on set almost at all times. And Courtney Storer, Chris's sister, is the like food culinary producer on the show. And she just, I think, does such an amazing job making all of the dishes look so beautiful that I think she'll just be like working away, like
Oh,
on
yeah, yeah.
set. And then they'll be like, oh, let's like grab these couple of shots. But I don't think it's like a full unit. I think it's like their main unit. And
Yeah.
because most of it is shot in like the same location, on the stage for the restaurant, they can just like get things pretty quickly. But shout out to our AEs for organizing so many different types of B-roll shots. And we basically have like a shared project where you can just search, like the bear clean like daytime and be like, oh, here's a bunch of like insert shots of this, or like we need meat being prepped, blah blah blah, and you can just search like those keywords. So it really makes it easy to like take advantage of the wealth of embarrassment of riches we have, and we have all of our like seasons B-roll all in the same production, so it's easy to just be like,
Oh,
oh, I think
that's
I remember
beautiful.
having, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because you're like, we use stuff sometimes that we're like, yeah, this was shot like 3 years ago, but like it's the perfect vibe for what we're going for, like let's grab it and add it in there.
That's like one of the conveniences too about the show being so like tonally in look consistent, that
Mm-hmm.
like you can do that and it's not like where did that come from? Like
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like they're usually wearing the same like white or blue aprons too. So a lot of times you can be like, okay, if we're just seeing hands, a lot of the times like, we can like cheat something for a different time or something like that.
is it her hands, or like who's if there's hands, are
It's
is
usually
it
the
her?
actors. Yeah. I mean, a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
the actors also went to like culinary school and did a lot of like training.
Mhm.
So it's pretty impressive. And like sometimes we'll be like, we should use this shot where we pan up from like Carmy chopping to like his face to be like, it is Jeremy. This isn't a double.
Yeah,
Like
this is
he's
not a
fucking put in
stunt.
the work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, this
It's
is
not
not
like,
an onion stunt.
exactly, or like a movie where it's like, oh yeah, we're not going to see like their hands playing the guitar because there's a double. It's like,
Yeah.
no, they do a lot of their own work or prep work in the kitchen, and then Courtney just makes it look gorgeous for all the inserts.
Okay, so now switching gears a little bit. This is another hot topic issue. Well, maybe. But basically, you know how everybody's always talking about AI, and
Mhm.
they're like, what is AI going to take our jobs? Like people will ask me, people who aren't in post at all, like basically if AI has taken my job, and I'm like, well, depends on what your job is. I mean, first of all, because
Yeah.
in some respects, like with podcasts, I do edit a good amount of podcasts. Like there are some people whose probably were replaced by AI because it can do auto cuts. But I'm just curious about like your thoughts on AI in editing as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough subject because it's so like unknown still. Like there's so much we can't tell about it, and it's
Yeah.
crazy that like, I'll be looking at my iPhone and it's like montage of, your dog over the years, and they just like cut together all these little like photos and videos and put a little sappy song under it, and I'm like, that's editing, like
Yeah.
it doesn't have artistic merit, but like that's editing. So I
Yeah.
understand the like fear of that feeling intimidating, but I also feel like I said that's so like soulless. I think hopefully people would understand that like just doing a little like super cut of like a bunch of images is not going to elicit the same response as like having a human who's picking this exact emotional moment. It's interesting because the union really did a great job like having a lot of discussions surrounding AI as we were talking about going on strike and all those different things. And people are talking about it being like the transition from like film to digital, where it's like obviously a lot of jobs were lost and people had to like retrain in certain ways, but it also opened up a lot of creative possibilities. So I don't want to be completely naive or just like optimistic about it. Like obviously I think things are going to have to adjust, but I'm like, hopefully if new AI tools can enable like, you know, it to take off of assistant editors plates the like boring organizational things and leave them more time for assemblies and doing things like that, that would be the goal, you know, is like maybe we
Yeah.
can just, they can do the boring parts of editing and leave more time for us to do the creative artistic things. I don't know. I'm not someone who's trying to be like, sound the alarms, we're all going to lose our jobs. But also it is
me
like,
either.
but also it
It's
is
so
intimidating. Yeah.
it would be amazing if that was the way that it was used. Like, you know, we're still going to hire AEs with livable wages, but they can have all these tools that make their job easier. That would be the ideal version, rather than now we don't have AEs.
I know personally that like the human aspect of AEs is so important to me. Like just being able to go to lunch with the rest of the post team and be like, let's hear about your weekend. Let's talk about our favorite films of the year. Let's just not think about the show, or be like, come and watch this cut. I need fresh eyes. Like that's something that you can never have AI do. So that's my like, you know, optimistic view on it, is that like at the end of the day, filmmaking is about like collaboration and that human connection. And like that's the thing that's going to be irreplaceable. Like AI can do stuff faster, it can be more organized, but like it can't have a full discussion with you. It can't have, you know, it can't distract you from the stresses of the job. So anyway, that's why I will be using AEs for a very long time for that reason, human AEs. But I will do my part in the fight against, you know, our AI overlords. But yeah, it's tough when it feels like this big unknown and we haven't even fully grappled with like the capacity of what it can do. But I'm just like, all right, let's make sure that we're committed to keeping our teams as human as possible and use AI for the things we don't want to do is going to be my goal, at least for the short term.
It's a good goal. I want everyone to have that goal.
Fingers crossed. We'll see. Maybe I'm being naive, but.
So, do you have a favorite keyboard shortcut or one that people tend to not know about?
Oh, this is a great question. I'm trying to think what do I want to promo on the podcast. My like trio that I love is Q, W, and E. Q is enable, disable, and then W and E are like bump up or down a track. And I feel like I use those all the time to just go like, okay, turn this off, turn this on, you know, bump it up or down. Cause I feel like moving things like vertically is something I do a lot more than I expected to, and wasn't one of the like default keyboard shortcuts. My like keyboards is like a mix of like Final Cut 7 keys and Premiere keys, and then random things I've put on. So I'd say shout out to that little trio. They helped me out a lot.
I also learned about that one late, and you realize how much time you wasted by physically moving things up and down
using
with
the mouse. Crazy. Yeah.
yeah it's like as you know that you've really like made it as an editor in some sense when you hardly are like touching the mouse.
Totally. No, it's so true.
Do you ever find that other artistic mediums help motivate or inspire your work in editing? Or like, do you have any other types of art that you make or participate in outside of editing?
I've always really liked kind of collaging. Like
that makes so much sense.
Which is so editing, like even my bedroom, like growing up, there was just like a huge like magazine collage wall. And it's something that like the day of the election, I was so stressed. I was just like, I'm just going to collage and like distract myself, which did not work, but here we are. But yeah, I feel like that's such a fun medium of just being like, oh, what are the things that I'm trying to like combine? And, you know, I never want to like do anything with these little collages I make. Maybe I'll put one like up in my house or turn it into like a card, but it's never something I would do to like make money. It's just like a great distraction, just something that's like a creative outlet. Cause that's something about filmmaking that is a little bit like sad to me, is that like you spend all this time making something and then it's like, I can't hold like an episode of The Bear. It just exists in the ether. Like, going back to film, like there was something nice about like at least you hold like a spool of film. So it's like we put so much time and energy into this thing that's just like, you know, a digital file.
Intangible. Yeah.
So it is nice to like do something like that. Or I have some like paint by numbers too, which are like, you know, a fun kind of like relaxing thing, which is like, okay, I made something and I'm like holding it in my hand, which is something you can't really say as like a filmmaker. So I'd say those are kind of fun, like artistic hobbies. And I love cutting to music, as I'm sure is very apparent by the bear. So I love, you know, Adam Epstein also was like, he has a playlist that's like songs I want to use in an edit one day. And, you know, sometimes I'll be listening to music and come upon a song and I'm like, oh, this would be so cool to cut to one day. So I think that's also like the marriage between, okay, maybe
Oh, yeah.
sometime you'll like find a place for the song that inspired me outside the cutting room. So yeah, I think that kind of that overlaps there.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I do think it's like understated how important it is to have a artistic medium outside of the one that you do to for your career or to make money that is not monetized and you
Mm-hmm.
just do for yourself, because the truth is, like, when we were kids, that's where all this whole thing came from. It's like
Yeah.
we were inspired or motivated to make art regardless of money, so it just feels much better to have some things that are just for you.
Editing related, but like one of my favorite traditions is every year I'll do like an end of year recap of all the videos I took on my iPhone. And it's like, you know, something I just like show to like Michael and I'm like, what do you think? And then share it with our friends and family. But like, it always brings me back so much joy of like, this is why I got into editing, to like make something to show like my friends and family, maybe make them laugh, use songs that I love.
Yeah.
And I'm never gonna, you know, put that out in the world to make money. It's just like, it's nice to separate like, okay, let's do some of the stuff that like, yes, we got into editing and filmmaking because we love it. Let's make sure we don't fall out of love with it because it's become our career.
I do the exact same thing
It's
with
the
my
best.
and I even like I pick songs for every month. Like I just write a list like as the months go by, like
Oh, nice.
what was the song I was listening to that month, and then yeah, I do the exact same thing. So there's probably a lot of editors out there who do something like that.
Yeah, doing something for yourself is so fun. And it's also like a little bit humbling too to be like, oh, when you're the one who's like driving the creative thing, you're like, oh, right, this is hard. It's so easy to sit in the cutting room and be like, why did they film it this way? Or like, what was this
Yeah.
reasoning? And then you're like, oh, right, it's hard to communicate your vision to someone else. So anyway, it's always good to just like, you know, put yourself in someone else's shoes too.
Is there a director or a type of show or a type of project that you would really love to do next or in the near future?
I've always said that it would be so fun to do a musical in terms of just like a
Same.
genre. I'm like that.
Same.
I cut like one musical short film when I was at NYU, and it was such a fun, you know, there's so many challenges in many ways, but I've done like performance video and, you know, some stuff from like Vivo as I was starting out, but to do like a full musical, I don't think of myself as like a crazy musicals person. Like there's some people who are like, you know, theater kids. My sister is one of them, so shout out to her. But I can like appreciate like a well done musical. I'm like, Wicked was so awesome. I loved Tick Tick Boom. Also, they both had the same editor, Myron Kirstein, who's very, very talented. So yeah, I feel like when a musical works, I'm just like so sold. So I'd be like, I'd love to try to figure that out at some point.
Yeah.
So that'll be my answer. Yeah, and I love mockumentaries. I would love to do something else that's like a mockumentary style.
We're the same person.
There's no wonder we work together
what
for so
I
long.
would say.
Yeah. I'm like Christopher Guest. I guess that. Shout out to Christopher Guest. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly the two things I would say.
We got to get on this. Someone put together a musical mockumentary, and Audrey and I got
it's to the point where like I think I have to do it. Like I'm like I guess I'm the one who's gonna have
if
to.
Not you, who else? Yeah.
Yeah, musical mockumentary is like Waiting for Guffman is a good example of combining those elements in a very fun way.
Oh my gosh, yes. Waiting for Guffman, A Mighty Wind. Yeah, those are some great ones. Yep.
Okay, finally, this also could be contentious. Unless you like don't have an opinion, then it wouldn't be. Do you have a prediction for Best Feature winner?
Oh, for the
at the
Oscars?
Oscars. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I am rooting for Honora. I loved Honora
Oh,
so
yeah.
much. So I think that would be my personal pick. I don't know if that's
Yeah, there's a
contentious.
difference. There's a difference
Yeah,
between like personal pick and prediction because we all know the Oscars are kind of a toss up like a
right.
lot of the time.
Totally. I would say if I were giving the award, I would choose Honora. I also think it was so brilliantly edited by Sean Baker. And normally I'm very tough on on directors who cut their own work, but I thought he did such an amazing
Yeah.
job. But I'm gonna predict it goes to The Brutalist. We'll see.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I heard that Sean Baker also edited Honora chronologically. That kind of shook me a little bit. I was like, but then after watching it, I was like, that makes sense because there are scenes in that film where, like, holistically, I would feel like if you weren't cutting it chronologically, that it would have been a lot shorter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was interesting. I listened to an interview with him too, and it seemed like he doesn't do like a rough cut. He basically just
Right.
like goes right to like a fine cut, and it just like goes, like you said, in order, which was so fascinating to me because he has it all in his head, and he says he takes off a couple of months between production and when he starts cutting to try to be as like removed from it as possible. He was like, yeah, there's sometimes I'm cutting it and I'm like cursing like director me because I'm like, why did you do it this way? And I was like, yes, every editor can relate to that, like with their director. So he has like the
Yeah.
two sides of his brain working there. But yeah, it's so I think it's just such a like cohesive story, and I love how you think it's going to be this movie about one thing and then it slowly becomes something else, and the way that kind of like Igor is introduced as a character
Yeah.
through the edit as he becomes like a bigger
Mhm.
part of the story. I just think is like it's so beautifully done.
Yeah, I agree.
You have to tell me your pick for best picture.
I think it would be so fun if The Substance won.
Oh, it's so fun. I do love The Substance, and it's so wacky. It's so funny. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe how funny it was. It's such a like commitment to the vision, and it pays off so great at the end.
If the Academy gave horror a Best Picture win, that would be a huge change.
It would probably be the first time since like, well, I guess you could argue maybe Parasite is like a horror film, but like Silence of the Lambs before
Mm,
that is like kind of the
yeah.
last one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really never happened. I feel like Parasite is it's almost like too much of a like it's very prestigious and it feels
Hmm.
very like highbrow in some way. Whereas The Substance like is so wacky. Like Parasite is not weird at all by comparison to The Substance.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it will win, but that would be my fun pick.
I would be so
Yeah.
down with The Substance win. It was so great. I was like so scared to see it because I was just like, oh my God, it's gonna be body horror. It's gonna be so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, no, it's so like over the top and like goofy and zany that I just like had the best time watching it. It was so fun.
Okay, well, prayers up for The Substance or Nora. Either of those would be great. Thank you, Joanna, for joining me today on the Edit Girls podcast. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. It was great to catch up, and I love Edit Girl, so thanks for giving me a shout out.